I told my neighbor, "Come with me," as a joke. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. And that should have been the first warning that absolutely nothing about the next 2 weeks was going to go according to plan. Because when I pulled out of my driveway that morning, I thought I was leaving alone. I thought I was heading out on a solo road trip in a beat-up van that had consumed every spare weekend of my life for the last 6 months. I thought the biggest problem I'd face would be whether the transmission survived the mountains. Instead, 3 days later, I was standing in the rain outside a motel with a woman I'd barely known a year, wondering how a joke had somehow become the most important decision either of us had made in years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It started on a Tuesday morning. The kind of morning that feels like every other morning you've had for months. I had the van packed before sunrise. The roof box was loaded. The cooler was wedged behind the passenger seat. Every storage compartment I'd built into the back was stuffed with supplies. Tools, food, extra water, camping gear, a paper map I'd spent way too much time marking up. I stood in the driveway staring at it all for a second before climbing into the driver's seat. The van wasn't pretty. Actually, ugly was probably the more accurate word. The paint was faded. The bumper didn't quite line up. One side mirror vibrated whenever I went over 60. But I'd rebuilt enough of it with my own hands that it felt less like a vehicle and more like a stubborn project that refused to die. And that morning, it finally felt ready. So was I. At least I thought I was. I backed halfway out of the driveway when movement across the street caught my eye. Rachel, coffee mug in one hand, messy ponytail. Standing on her porch, looking half awake and entirely too observant for 8 in the morning. She looked at the van, then the roof box, then the stack of supplies visible through the rear windows, then back at me. "You look like you're running from the law." I laughed. That's one way to describe it. She took another sip of coffee. "Where are you going?" "No idea." That got a smile. "No idea?" "No schedule, no destination, just driving." She stared at me for a second. Most people would have laughed. Most people would have called it irresponsible. Rachel just nodded like she was seriously considering the idea. That should have been my second warning. See, Rachel wasn't spontaneous. At least not from what I'd seen. She was organized, predictable. The kind of person who brought reusable bags to the grocery store and remembered appointments without needing reminders. Meanwhile, I'd once forgotten I owned a dentist. So no, spontaneous wasn't the word I'd have used. Which is why what happened next caught me completely off guard. She pointed toward the van. "You really trust that thing?" Trust is a strong word. Confidence? Not really. Blind optimism? Now we're getting closer. She laughed into her coffee. For a moment, we just stood there. Morning sunlight, quiet neighborhood. 2 neighbors having a completely ordinary conversation. Then I shrugged. Mostly because I didn't know what else to say. "Come with me and find out." It was a joke. 100% a joke. The kind of thing people say when they're talking about impossible ideas. I wasn't asking. I wasn't expecting anything. I barely finished the sentence. Rachel said, "Okay," just like that. No hesitation, no laugh, no smile. Just okay. I blinked. "Wait." She raised an eyebrow. "Okay, okay. Like, actually okay?" She took another sip of coffee. "Yep." I stared at her. She stared back. Then she said something that somehow made the situation even weirder. "Give me 15 minutes. And before I could respond, she turned around and walked into a house. I sat there in stunned silence. The van idled. A bird landed on a mailbox. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Meanwhile, My brain was desperately trying to catch up. Because surely she was kidding, right? There was no universe where my neighbor packed a bag and climbed into a van because of a joke. That wasn't a thing that happened. Normal adults didn't do that. 10 minutes passed, then 12, then 14. At minute 15 exactly, her front door opened. And there she was. Duffel bag, hoodie tied around her waist, sunglasses pushed up on her head, walking toward the van like we'd been planning this for months. I rolled down the passenger window. Rachel? She stopped beside the door. Yeah? Are you serious? Very. What about work? I have vacation days. What about your house? It survived before I left. What about literally everything else? That finally made her smile. Then the smile faded. Not completely. Just enough for something honest to show through. She looked back at her effing,